The helicopter blades whirred overhead as Defense Secretary Robert Hayes, my father, watched his Special Forces team escort my sister Lauren away in handcuffs after she slapped my 8-year-old autistic son Connor at his birthday party, leaving a handprint on his face and trauma that would last forever. Dad's voice carried the authority of commanding the world's most powerful military as he spoke into a secure phone. The individual who assaulted my disabled grandson has been detained under military jurisdiction. She will face the full consequences of attacking a child under federal protection.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, just 6 hours earlier on what should have been the most joyful day of my son's year. My name is Captain Sarah Hayes-Coleman, and I'm a military intelligence officer stationed at the Pentagon. At 34, I'd spent the last 12 years balancing my career and national security with raising my son, Connor, who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder when he was 3 years old. My husband, Marcus, a pediatric therapist at Walter Reed Medical Center, had been deployed to Germany for the past month, leaving me to navigate Connor's 8th birthday celebration as a single parent. Defense Secretary Robert Hayes had served in the highest levels of military leadership for over 2 decades, commanding respect from generals and world leaders alike. But his greatest pride wasn't his Distinguished Service Cross or his role in national defense. It was being Papa Rob to Connor, the grandson he'd learned to communicate with through patience, understanding, and unconditional love. "Connor's party is going to be perfect," Dad had said during our planning call, his gruff military voice softening the way it always did when discussing his grandson. 8 years old, and he's already teaching this old soldier about courage and resilience every single day. Connor's autism presented unique challenges and incredible gifts. He struggled with loud noises, unexpected changes in routine, and social interactions that came naturally to other children. But he also had an extraordinary memory for historical facts, could recite entire passages from his favorite books, and created elaborate drawings of military aircraft that amazed even Dad's Pentagon colleagues. My sister Lauren had always been the glamorous one in our family. 3 years younger than me, she'd built a successful career as a lifestyle influencer in Los Angeles, documenting her picture-perfect life for millions of followers who envied her designer clothes, luxury travels, and carefully curated social media presence. She'd never married, had no children, and treated Connor's autism like an inconvenient family secret that disrupted her aesthetic vision of Hayes family perfection. "I still can't believe you chose to keep him," Lauren had said when Connor was first diagnosed, as if raising a child with autism was some kind of character flaw. "There are places for kids like that, Sarah. You could have had a normal life." I'd never forgotten those words, but I'd tried to maintain family peace for Dad's sake. He loved both his daughters and desperately wanted us to get along, often playing mediator when Lauren's thoughtlessness clashed with my protective instincts. For Connor's 8th birthday, I'd planned a small party in our Arlington backyard with 5 of his classmates from his special needs program, his favorite superhero decorations, and all the sensory-friendly accommodations that helped him feel comfortable and happy. Lauren had flown in from Los Angeles specifically for the celebration, promising Dad she wanted to be a better aunt and spend quality time with Connor.
The disruption came at 3:47 p.m., right as Connor was blowing out his candles on the superhero-themed cake I'd spent hours decorating with his favorite military aircraft designs. The F-16 flyover had been the highlight of his day, and he was stimming with pure joy, rocking back and forth, flapping his hands, and making the excited vocal sounds that meant he was overwhelmed with happiness. Connor, "Stop that weird flapping thing," Lauren commanded sharply, positioning herself directly in front of him with her camera crew recording. "You're 8 years old now. Act like a big boy for the camera." I immediately moved toward them, recognizing the signs of Connor becoming overstimulated. "Lauren, he's just excited about the planes. This is how he expresses joy." "This is embarrassing," she interrupted, her voice carrying the authority she used when directing her social media productions. "My followers expect to see a normal family celebration, not some kind of freak show." The word freak hit Connor like a physical blow. His stimming stopped abruptly, his face crumpled with confusion and hurt, and I watched my beautiful, sensitive son begin to withdraw into himself, the way he always did when people made him feel different and unwanted. "Connor, stop that weird flapping thing," I said, stepping between her and Connor. "He's autistic, not performing for your social media. This is his birthday party, not your content creation session." "Maybe that's the problem," Lauren snapped, her mask of Instagram perfection slipping completely. "You've turned this kid into some kind of special needs poster child instead of teaching him how to act normal in public." Connor's breathing became rapid and shallow, the beginning of a meltdown triggered by stress, confusion, and the crushing realization that his aunt saw him as something shameful. His classmates, all children with various special needs, began to sense the tension and started looking uncomfortable. "Lauren, stop," I warned, moving to comfort Connor. "You're upsetting him and his friends." "Good," she replied with shocking cruelty. "Maybe if someone finally told him the truth about how his behavior affects other people, he'd learn to control himself." And that's when Connor began to melt down completely. The overstimulation from the excitement, combined with Lauren's harsh words and aggressive energy, triggered a full autistic meltdown. He began crying, rocking more intensely, and covering his ears while making distressed vocalizations that clearly showed he was in emotional pain. "Turn off those cameras," I ordered Lauren's crew, but she waved them to keep recording. "This is perfect content," she said coldly. "Real families dealing with real challenges. My followers eat this authentic stuff up." "Connor, sweetie, it's okay," I said, kneeling beside my son and speaking in the calm, low voice he needed during meltdowns. "You're safe. Papa Rob is here, Mommy is here, and you don't have to perform for anyone." But Lauren wasn't finished. As Connor's meltdown continued, she became increasingly frustrated with his disruption of her planned content. The other children's parents began looking concerned, and Dad, who had been inside taking a work call, emerged to see his grandson in distress. "What's happening here?" Dad asked, his military training immediately assessing the situation. "Your grandson is having one of his episodes," Lauren said dismissively. "I'm trying to get some decent footage, but he's making it impossible with all this screaming and flailing around." Dad's expression darkened as he took in the scene. Connor in meltdown, the camera crew still recording, and Lauren treating Connor's autism like a performance problem rather than a neurological difference that required understanding and accommodation. "Lauren, you need to step back and let Sarah handle this," Dad said with the tone he used for subordinates who had crossed a line. "I'm trying to help," Lauren protested. "Someone needs to teach this kid that the world isn't going to accommodate his every special need." And then, as Connor's distress reached its peak, Lauren made the decision that would destroy our family forever. She raised her hand and slapped Connor across the face, the sound echoing across our backyard like a gunshot. The slap left a perfect red handprint on Connor's left cheek and stunned our backyard into complete silence. For a moment that seemed to last forever, nobody moved. Connor's meltdown stopped abruptly, not because he felt better, but because the physical shock and emotional betrayal had overwhelmed his system beyond his ability to respond. Then he began to sob. Not the loud, expressive crying of his earlier meltdown, but the heartbroken whimpers of a child who just learned that someone who was supposed to love him saw him as something shameful and wrong.
Lauren! My voice exploded across the yard as I lunged toward my sister, my military training warring with my maternal fury. What the hell is wrong with you? Someone had to do something, Lauren said defensively, though I could see shock in her eyes as she realized what she'd just done. He was completely out of control, embarrassing everyone. Sometimes kids need a reality check.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Dad's reaction was swift and terrifying. Defense Secretary Robert Hayes, the man who commanded the most powerful military force in human history, crossed our backyard in 4 strides, his face carrying the cold fury I'd only seen during classified national security briefings about active threats to American interests. "Get away from my grandson," he said to Lauren, his voice carrying an authority that had made world leaders reconsider their decisions. "Get away from him now." I scooped Connor into my arms, his small body trembling against mine while he tried to understand why his aunt had hurt him on his birthday. The red mark on his cheek was already beginning to darken into a bruise, evidence of violence against a disabled child at what should have been a celebration of his life. "Connor, baby, it's okay," I whispered, but I knew it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. You didn't do anything wrong. Aunt Lauren made a very bad choice, and now grown-ups are going to make sure she learns better. Within 30 minutes of Dad's phone call, our backyard had transformed into what looked like a crime scene investigation. Military police arrived first, followed by agents from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, and finally a team from the Pentagon's Family Advocacy Program, all coordinating to document what they classified as assault on a military dependent with special needs. Detective Colonel Maria Rodriguez, the lead investigator, found me in Connor's bedroom, where I was helping him process what had happened using his favorite sensory toys and picture books about emotions. The bruise on his cheek had darkened considerably, and every time I looked at it, I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak that threatened to overwhelm my military training. "Captain Coleman," Detective Rodriguez said gently, "I need to document Connor's injuries and get his statement about what happened. I specialize in crimes against children with disabilities, so I understand how to communicate with him." What followed was the most heartbreaking interview I'd ever witnessed. Detective Rodriguez used visual cards, simple language, and endless patience to help Connor explain what Aunt Lauren had done and how it made him feel. His answers revealed not just the physical assault, but the psychological damage of being attacked for autistic behaviors he couldn't control. "Aunt Lauren said I was bad and weird," Connor told Detective Rodriguez, his small voice barely audible. "She hit me because I was happy about the airplanes. But Papa Rob says being happy is good." "You're absolutely right, Connor," Detective Rodriguez assured him. "Being happy is always good. No one should ever hit you for being yourself." Meanwhile, in our living room, Lauren was being questioned by federal agents about her actions. Through the closed door, I could hear her trying to justify what she'd done with explanations that grew increasingly desperate as she realized the legal consequences of assaulting a disabled child. "I was trying to help him learn appropriate behavior," Lauren insisted. "Sarah has been too permissive with his condition. Sometimes children need firm correction to understand boundaries." "Miss Hayes," NTN's Agent Thompson responded, "what you're describing is not correction. It's abuse. Striking a child for exhibiting behaviors related to their disability is a federal crime under the Americans with Disabilities Act and military family protection statutes." Dad emerged from his study carrying a thick file that made my stomach drop. He'd been coordinating with Pentagon legal staff, and what I saw in his expression suggested that Lauren's situation was far worse than even I had imagined. "Sarah," Dad said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who just received classified intelligence about a serious threat, "we need to discuss what the investigation has uncovered about Lauren's pattern of behavior toward Connor." The file
contained evidence that shattered any remaining sympathy I might have felt for my sister. Lauren's social media analytics showed she'd been documenting Connor's autistic behaviors without our knowledge, posting videos and photos of his meltdowns and stimming to her followers with captions that mocked his weird habits and attention-seeking tantrums. She's been exploiting Connor's disability for content, Agent Thompson explained. Her engagement rates spike whenever she posts about her difficult special needs nephew. She's built part of her brand around being the long-suffering aunt dealing with family autism drama. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical assault. Lauren hadn't just hit Connor in a moment of frustration. She'd been systematically exploiting his neurological differences for social media profit, while presenting herself as a patient, understanding family member. "There's more," Dad said grimly. The investigation revealed that Lauren has been in contact with several anti-vaccination and autism cure groups. She's been sharing Connor's personal information and medical details with organizations that promote dangerous treatments for autistic children. My blood turned to ice. What kind of treatments? Bleach enemas, chelation therapy, restrictive diets that can cause malnutrition, all promoted by groups that view autism as something that needs to be eliminated rather than accepted and supported. Detective Rodriguez returned from Connor's interview with documentation that would serve as evidence in federal court. She said, "Connor is remarkably articulate about his experience. He clearly understands that what Lauren did was wrong, and he's expressed fear about seeing her again." "What happens now?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. Lauren is being charged with assault on a disabled minor, exploitation of a disabled child for profit, and violation of privacy regarding medical information, Dad explained, with the clinical precision he used during national security briefings. As if summoned by our conversation, Lauren's voice carried from the living room where she was still being questioned. "This is insane! I'm family! Sarah can't seriously want to destroy my life over one mistake." "One mistake?" The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. "You've been exploiting my son's disability for months, sharing his private medical information with dangerous groups, and then you physically assaulted him at his birthday party?" The agents exchanged glances, recognizing that our family crisis had escalated beyond simple assault into a complex case involving exploitation, privacy violations, and potential endangerment of a disabled child. By evening, our quiet Arlington neighborhood had been transformed into a federal crime scene that drew national media attention. News vans lined our street as reporters learned that Defense Secretary Robert Hayes' daughter had been arrested for assaulting his disabled grandson at a birthday party, with the entire incident captured on video by her own social media crew. Lauren's social media empire began collapsing in real time as her followers discovered the truth about her authentic family content. The video of her slapping Connor went viral within hours, but not in the way she'd intended. Instead of sympathy for a frustrated aunt dealing with a difficult child, viewers saw what federal investigators saw: an adult attacking a vulnerable child for exhibiting behaviors he couldn't control. "Sarah, we need to discuss Connor's safety," Dad said as we watched the media circus from our living room windows. "Lauren's arrest has triggered responses from several extremist groups that target families with disabled children." Agent Thompson showed me printouts from online threats from anti-autism activists who viewed Lauren as a hero for standing up to special needs entitlement. These groups had obtained our home address and were encouraging followers to show support for Lauren by confronting our family directly. They're calling Connor a burden on society and saying Lauren was justified in trying to correct his behavior, Agent Thompson explained. "We've identified at least 12 individuals making specific threats against your family." The escalation terrified me. What had started as a family crisis was becoming a national flashpoint in debates about disability rights, family discipline, and social media exploitation. Connor, who still didn't fully understand why his aunt had hurt him, was now the center of a federal investigation and target of strangers who viewed his autism as something that needed to be eliminated. "Mama, why are there so many people outside?" Connor asked, pressing his face against the window to watch the news crews. The bruise on his cheek had darkened to purple, making him look even more fragile and young. "Sometimes when something important happens, people want to know about it," I explained, struggling to find age-appropriate words for a situation no child should have to experience. Papa Rob is making sure the right people understand what Lauren did was wrong. Dr. Jennifer Martinez from Walter Reed's Pediatric Psychology Unit arrived to assess Connor's trauma and provide therapeutic support. Her examination revealed that while Connor's physical injuries were minor, the psychological impact was significant and potentially long-lasting. "Connor is experiencing confusion about family loyalty and safety," Dr. Martinez explained after her evaluation. "He understands that Lauren hurt him, but he's struggling to comprehend why someone who was supposed to love him would cause him pain for being autistic." The therapeutic assessment would become crucial evidence in Lauren's prosecution. Federal law treated assault against disabled children as a hate crime when the violence was motivated by the victim's disability, which carried enhanced penalties and mandatory minimum sentences. Meanwhile, Lauren's legal situation deteriorated rapidly as investigators uncovered the full scope of her exploitation. Her social media analytics revealed systematic monetization of Connor's autism, including sponsored content from companies selling unproven autism treatments and partnerships with organizations promoting harmful interventions for autistic children. She's been earning significant income by portraying Connor as a family burden, Detective Rodriguez reported to Dad and me. Her most profitable content featured his meltdowns and stimming behaviors, presented as examples of how autism disrupts normal family life. The financial exploitation charges carried serious prison time, but it was Dad's response that would make Lauren's case historic. As defense secretary, he had access to resources and legal authorities that most families could never invoke to protect their disabled children. Lauren made a critical error when she chose to target Connor, Dad told the assembled federal task force coordinating her prosecution. "She didn't just assault my grandson, she attacked a military dependent, exploited a disabled child for profit, and endangered his safety by sharing his personal information with dangerous groups." "Sir, what specific actions are you authorizing?" General Morrison asked. "Full federal prosecution under every applicable statute. Disability rights violations, child exploitation, military family protection laws, and domestic terrorism charges for the online threats her actions generated." Dad replied, with the decisiveness that had made him one of the most effective defense secretaries in modern history. As night fell, I realized that Lauren's attack on Connor had triggered something unprecedented, the full weight of the Department of Defense being deployed to protect a disabled child and establish legal precedent for prosecuting those who exploit and abuse children with disabilities.
Within 48 hours of Lauren's arrest, Dad had mobilized resources that transformed our personal tragedy into a landmark federal case for disability rights. The Pentagon's legal team, FBI specialists in crimes against children, and attorneys from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division descended on Arlington to build what would become the most comprehensive prosecution of disability-based child abuse in modern history. "Sarah, I need you to understand what we're building here," Dad said as we met in the secure conference room he'd established at the Pentagon. "Lauren's assault on Connor isn't just a family crisis. It's an attack on the fundamental rights of disabled children everywhere. This case will set precedent for how federal law protects vulnerable kids." The legal coalition Dad had assembled was unprecedented. Attorney General Patricia Williams had personally assigned her top prosecutors to the case. FBI Director James Collins had made Lauren's prosecution a national priority. Even the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights had joined to address the exploitation of special needs children for social media profit. Defense Secretary Hayes, lead prosecutor Margaret Chen said, reviewing the evidence files, "This is the most thoroughly documented case of disability-based child abuse and exploitation we've handled. Lauren's own social media content will convict her." The evidence was overwhelming and systematic. Lauren's Instagram and TikTok accounts contained hundreds of posts exploiting Connor's autism, including videos of his meltdowns that she'd monetized through sponsorship deals with companies selling unproven autism treatments.
Her private messages revealed coordination with anti-autism advocacy groups that promoted dangerous interventions for autistic children. There's something else, Agent Thompson continued, looking uncomfortable. Lauren's financial records show she earned over $200,000 last year specifically from content exploiting Connor's disability. She's been profiting from his autism while presenting herself as a long-suffering family member dealing with difficult behavior. The systematic exploitation cut deeper than the physical assault. Dad's financial investigators had traced payments from pharmaceutical companies developing autism cures, supplement manufacturers targeting desperate parents, and organizations promoting conversion therapy for autistic children, all funneled through Lauren's social media empire built on Connor's suffering. Dr. Amanda Foster, the nation's leading expert on autism advocacy, arrived from Johns Hopkins with documentation that would help prosecutors establish the broader impact of Lauren's crimes. Her research showed how social media exploitation of disabled children contributed to discrimination and violence against the autism community. Connor's case represents thousands of disabled children being exploited for content, Dr. Foster explained to the legal team. Lauren's posts reinforced harmful stereotypes about autism being a burden, which directly leads to abuse and neglect of autistic kids nationwide. Marcus called from his deployment in Germany, his voice breaking as he processed what had happened to his son. "Sarah, I'm requesting emergency leave to come home immediately. Connor needs both his parents right now." "The Army is expediting your return," Dad assured him over the secure video call. "Connor's trauma requires family support, and this prosecution needs your testimony about Lauren's history of inappropriate behavior toward him." Dr. Martinez provided updates on Connor's psychological recovery that offered hope amid the legal proceedings. He's resilient and responding well to trauma therapy. His ability to articulate his experience will be crucial for prosecution, but more importantly, he's learning that what happened wasn't his fault. Connor's recovery was remarkable for an 8-year-old processing such complex trauma. The specialized autism therapy team from Walter Reed had developed techniques to help him understand the difference between appropriate family interactions and abuse, using visual aids and social stories he could comprehend. "Papa Rob," Connor said during one of Dad's visits, "the doctor said Aunt Lauren was wrong to hit me for being autistic. Does that mean being autistic is okay?" "Being autistic is more than okay, Connor," Dad replied with the tenderness that surprised everyone who only knew him as the stern defense secretary. "Being autistic is part of what makes you brilliant and special. Anyone who hurts you for being yourself is the one with the problem." Support poured in from unexpected sources. The National Autistic Self-Advocacy Network offered legal assistance. Military families with disabled children sent messages of solidarity. Even celebrities with autistic family members spoke out about Connor's case, amplifying awareness of how social media exploitation harms disabled children. This case has become a rallying point for disability rights, Prosecutor Chen reported. Lauren's prosecution is being watched by advocacy groups worldwide as a test of whether federal law will truly protect disabled children from exploitation and abuse. As the federal task force prepared for trial, I realized that Connor's suffering was being transformed into something powerful, a legal precedent that would protect countless other disabled children from the kind of systematic exploitation and abuse Lauren had inflicted on my son. The strategic brilliance of Dad's response became clear when he deployed elements typically reserved for national security threats to protect Connor and build an unassailable legal case against Lauren. What appeared to be overwhelming federal force was actually a carefully orchestrated operation designed to establish precedent that would protect disabled children nationwide. "Sarah, I need you to understand the broader strategy here," Dad said as we met with the legal team in his Pentagon office. "Lauren's prosecution isn't just about justice for Connor. It's about sending a message that exploiting and abusing disabled children carries severe federal consequences." Marcus had returned from Germany and was struggling to process the scope of what had happened to our son. As a pediatric therapist, he understood the psychological damage Lauren had inflicted, but as a father, he was devastated that he hadn't been there to protect Connor. "How did I miss the signs?" Marcus asked during our family meeting with Dr. Martinez. I'm trained to recognize abuse, and I let Lauren have unsupervised access to Connor for months. Lauren is a sophisticated manipulator who exploited your trust and professional obligations, Dr. Martinez assured him. Her social media persona was carefully crafted to hide her exploitation of Connor. Even trained professionals can be deceived by systematic deception. The prosecution strategy Dad had developed with federal attorneys was unprecedented in its scope and precision. Rather than treating Lauren's assault as an isolated incident, they were prosecuting it as part of a conspiracy to exploit disabled children for profit, a criminal enterprise that involved social media companies, advertising networks, and organizations promoting harmful autism treatments. "We're not just prosecuting Lauren," Prosecutor Chen explained. "We're dismantling an entire ecosystem that profits from the exploitation and abuse of disabled children. This case will create legal precedent that protects vulnerable kids from systematic predation." The evidence collection had revealed a network of influencers, companies, and organizations that deliberately targeted families with disabled children, offering financial incentives for content that portrayed autism as a burden requiring intervention, correction, or cure. Lauren had been a key node in this network, earning substantial income by presenting Connor's autism as evidence that special needs children disrupted normal family life. Lauren received over $50,000 in the past year specifically for posts showing Connor's meltdowns and stimming behaviors. Agent Thompson reported, companies selling autism treatments paid premium rates for content that made parents feel desperate enough to try dangerous interventions. Dad's strategic decision to involve special forces in Lauren's arrest had been calculated to demonstrate federal commitment to protecting disabled children. The helicopter, the tactical team, the military coordination, all designed to show that crimes against disabled kids would be treated with the same seriousness as threats to national security. The visual of special forces arresting someone who abused an autistic child sends a powerful message. It establishes that disabled children are under federal protection and that harming them triggers the full response of the United States government. Connor's recovery had been remarkable, aided by specialized therapy and the knowledge that powerful people were fighting to protect him. His testimony, delivered through age-appropriate interviews with trained specialists, would serve as the emotional center of the prosecution's case. Connor understands that what Aunt Lauren did was wrong. More importantly, he's learning that being autistic is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. The support he's received has been transformative. The defense strategy Lauren's attorneys had developed crumbled as federal investigators revealed the systematic nature of her exploitation. They couldn't claim momentary frustration when evidence showed months of calculated abuse disguised as family content creation. Lauren's legal team has requested a plea bargain, Prosecutor Chen informed us during a strategy meeting. They're offering guilty pleas to reduce charges in exchange for cooperation with the broader investigation into social media exploitation of disabled children. What would that mean for Connor? I asked. It would mean Lauren admits guilt and provides information about other exploitative networks, but it would also mean reduced prison time, Dad replied grimly. The question is whether accepting the plea serves Connor's interests and the broader goal of protecting disabled children. As we prepared for the final phase of Lauren's prosecution, I realized that Dad's strategic response had transformed our family tragedy into a catalyst for systemic change in how society protects its most vulnerable children.
The helicopter blades whirred overhead as Defense Secretary Robert Hayes, my father, watched his Special Forces team escort my sister Lauren away in handcuffs after she slapped my 8-year-old autistic son Connor at his birthday party, leaving a handprint on his face and trauma that would last forever. Dad's voice carried the authority of commanding the world's most powerful military as he spoke into his secure phone. The individual who assaulted my disabled grandson has been detained under military jurisdiction. She will face the full consequences of attacking a child under federal protection. But that moment of military precision came only after the most devastating family confrontation of our lives. The federal courthouse in Alexandria was packed for Lauren's sentencing hearing, with disability rights advocates, military families, and media representatives filling every seat. Connor sat between Marcus and me in the front row, wearing his favorite superhero shirt and holding the sensory toy that helped him stay calm in overwhelming situations. Judge Patricia Morrison called the court to order with the gravity appropriate for a case that had captured national attention. We are here today to sentence Lauren Hayes for federal charges, including assault on a disabled child, exploitation of a minor for profit, and conspiracy to distribute harmful medical misinformation. Lauren's defense team made one final attempt to minimize her crimes, arguing that she'd acted out of frustration rather than malice, that her social media content was meant to raise awareness about autism challenges, and that Connor's recovery proved the incident wasn't as serious as prosecutors claimed. Your Honor, defense attorney James Patterson said, my client made a mistake in a moment of stress, but she's not a monster. Lauren Hayes has spent her career bringing attention to important family issues, including the challenges of raising special needs children. Prosecutor Chen's response was swift and devastating. Your Honor, the defendant didn't make a mistake. She executed a business plan that required exploiting and ultimately abusing a disabled child. Lauren Hayes earned over $200,000 by portraying her nephew's autism as a family burden, then physically assaulted him when his natural behavior disrupted her content creation. The evidence presented during trial had been overwhelming. Video footage of the assault, financial records showing systematic exploitation, private messages coordinating with anti-autism groups, and Connor's own testimony delivered through specialized child interview techniques that accommodated his communication needs. When given the opportunity for a final statement, Lauren stood slowly and faced the judge with what appeared to be carefully rehearsed remorse. Your Honor, I want to apologize to Connor and my family for the pain I've caused. I never intended to hurt my nephew, and I hope someday he can forgive me. But then she made a fatal error that revealed her continued lack of understanding. I still believe that Connor would benefit from learning to control his behaviors better, and I hope this experience teaches him that actions have consequences. The courtroom erupted in angry murmurs as Lauren essentially blamed Connor for triggering his own abuse. Judge Morrison gavelled for silence, but her expression showed that Lauren had just sealed her fate with her complete failure to accept responsibility. Dad requested permission to address the court before sentencing. As Defense Secretary Robert Hayes approached the podium, the courtroom fell silent with the weight of his authority and the pain of a grandfather seeking justice for his disabled grandson. Your Honor, Dad said, his voice carrying 30 years of military leadership and personal anguish. My grandson Connor didn't just assault Connor, he declared war on every disabled child in America by treating autism as something shameful that justified violence and exploitation. He paused, looking directly at Lauren with the cold assessment he used for national security threats. My grandson Connor is brilliant, kind, and deserving of protection rather than punishment for being autistic. Lauren chose to see his disability as a business opportunity and ultimately as justification for assault. She has forfeited any claim to family loyalty or mercy. Judge Morrison announced her decision with the weight of constitutional law behind her words. Lauren Hayes, you exploited a vulnerable child for profit and assaulted him for exhibiting behaviors beyond his control. This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, lifetime prohibition from contact with children, and forfeiture of all profits earned through exploitation of Connor Hayes. 8 months after Lauren's sentencing, Connor and I stood in the Rose Garden at the Pentagon, watching him receive the Department of Defense's first ever Courage Award for a disabled child. At 9 years old, he'd become an unexpected symbol of resilience and the catalyst for federal legislation protecting disabled children from exploitation and abuse. Connor Hayes-Coleman, Dad announced to the assembled crowd of military officials and disability rights advocates, demonstrated extraordinary bravery in helping prosecutors understand how crimes against disabled children affect victims. His testimony helped establish the Connors Law protections that now safeguard vulnerable kids nationwide. Lauren was serving her 15-year sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania.
with no possibility of early release. Her appeals had been denied, her social media accounts permanently banned, and her influencer career destroyed. The $200,000 she'd earned exploiting Connor had been forfeited and donated to autism advocacy organizations. The precedent Dad's prosecution had established became known as the Hayes Protocol, federal law enforcement treating crimes against disabled children as matters of national security priority. 12 other cases had already been prosecuted under the new framework, resulting in significant prison sentences for those who exploited or abused disabled kids. Connor's recovery had been remarkable. The specialized therapy, combined with the knowledge that powerful people had fought to protect him, had transformed his trauma into strength. He still stimmed with joy when excited, still needed sensory accommodations, and still processed the world differently, but now he did so with confidence that being autistic was something to celebrate, not hide. "Papa Rob," Connor said during the awards ceremony, his voice clear and proud, "Dr. Martinez says I helped protect other kids like me. Does that mean I'm a hero?" "You're the biggest hero I know," Dad replied, his weathered hands gentle as he adjusted Connor's tie. "You taught this old soldier that real courage means being yourself, even when people try to make you feel ashamed." Marcus had transferred to a position at Walter Reed that kept him stateside permanently, refusing any assignments that would separate him from Connor. We'd become fierce advocates for military families with disabled children, ensuring they received the support and protection Connor's case had helped establish. The financial settlements from social media companies that had profited from Connor's exploitation funded the Connor Hayes-Coleman Foundation, which provided legal assistance to families fighting disability-based abuse and discrimination. We'd helped over 150 families access justice and protection for their disabled children. "Sometimes I think about Aunt Lauren," Connor told me one evening as we worked on his latest airplane model. "I hope she learns that being different isn't bad." His capacity for forgiveness amazed me, but his wisdom was even more remarkable. Connor had learned to separate the person who hurt him from the family member who'd been lost to greed and prejudice. The greatest victory wasn't Lauren's punishment, but Connor's transformation from victim to advocate. He spoke at disability rights conferences, met with legislators about protecting disabled children, and showed the world that autism was a difference to be valued, not a problem to be solved. We survived. We're stronger. And Connor is safe in ways that extend far beyond physical protection. He's safe in the knowledge that being himself is not just acceptable, but powerful enough to change laws and save other children.
3 years later, I watch Connor confidently address a Senate hearing on disability rights, his voice clear and steady as he explains to lawmakers why protecting disabled children matters. At 11 years old, he's become the youngest person ever to testify before Congress about autism advocacy, his experience transforming national policy on child protection. Senators, Connor says, his hands stimming slightly with nervous energy, but his message unwavering. Being autistic isn't something that needs to be fixed. It's part of who I am, and no one should be hurt for being themselves. Dad sits in the gallery, tears streaming down the face of the man who commanded the world's most powerful military. "That's my grandson," he whispers, "the bravest soldier I've ever known." Lauren will spend another 12 years in federal prison, her name forever associated with the landmark legislation that bears Connor's name. Connor's law has protected over 3,000 disabled children from exploitation and abuse, with federal prosecutors using the precedent Dad established to ensure justice for vulnerable kids nationwide. The foundation we built from Connor's suffering has become a beacon of hope for families fighting similar battles. Connor speaks at disability conferences, meets with world leaders about inclusion, and shows everyone that autism is a difference to be celebrated, not eliminated. Mama,
Connor said recently while building his latest model airplane. "I'm glad I'm autistic. It makes me see the world in special ways that help other kids." His wisdom humbles me daily. Connor transformed his trauma into purpose, his difference into strength, and his voice into a force for protecting children everywhere. We didn't just survive, we soared. And Connor's light shines so brightly that even the darkness Lauren brought into our lives couldn't dim his extraordinary spirit. The little boy who was slapped for being joyful grew up to be the young man who teaches the world that joy in our differences is worth defending with everything we have.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.